if I could get on a soapbox for a while, I think I would talk a lot about that, is like how people should take some time before they get in to know exactly what they want out of the military, because it takes everything from you during that contract period. You should get as much out of it as you can.
Welcome to the Military Bottom Line podcast, where we learn from veterans and those currently serving how to make the most out of a military contract. We're here to motivate, inspire, and help you leverage your service to positively impact you professionally, personally, and financially during your military career and beyond. Welcome to episode 36 of the Military Bottom Line podcast. Really excited for this episode today. It's just so different than any other episodes I've done. And as I sit down with Saved Rounds, as he prefers to remain anonymous, you can go check him out on Instagram, where he does a lot of writing. Just a really genuine conversation, and kind of learning from his story, his perspective, and he's got kind of a different story of how he joined, and I think it's really valuable, and he shares just a lot of wisdom, and you can tell that he spends a lot of time reflecting and internally, considering life. So I think that he shares a lot of wisdom and a lot of maturity about the military. So I think you guys will enjoy the episode. What's going on, man? Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, dude. How you doing? I know we've interacted a little bit online, and I've done a fair share of reading your content on Instagram via Saved Rounds, and so I'm looking forward to kind of hearing your story and how you found yourself in the military and kind of how it's played out for you.
Yeah, so Saved Rounds, the handle that I chose, is kind of when I was going through the active time that I went through, I felt like I wasn't maximizing my opportunities. I also felt like I went into the military when a lot of things were changing. We were transitioning from a wartime footing to a peacetime footing. And another one of the guys that you've had on the podcast, Warboy Actual, we had a conversation about, it was right after or before 9/11 this last year. And he wrote something that was pretty provocative. And so I responded to him and I said, like, man, there's so many people that feel like they haven't got to shoot their shot. So many people that post 9/11 were my age. I was in sixth grade, who by the time that we got to the age of enlistment, right, 18, there was so much controversy where the mission became unclear. There are a lot of us that still are really fired up and wanted to do something, but we're just so distrustful of what was happening at the time. And so by the time that a lot of us chose to enlist, or maybe enlist impulsively early on into an environment we didn't truly understand, at least for me, what really resonated was a lot of us, from my experience, which is limited in scope, obviously, felt like we didn't get the full experience. We didn't get to fully commit to being in the military as far as actually doing something substantial. Yeah. And so it was super challenging kind of being in the military and feeling unexpended, unused. And that's really what started me writing, was kind of about that feeling. And I think that resonated with me really well. And so far, a lot of folks that I've talked to feel similarly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely something like, I'm definitely not a writer. And it's interesting that some people turn to like writing as trying to kind of like, put those things into words and trying to like understand it better. But I found you and I read your stuff and I can definitely, connect with what you guys write about and what you write about. So I appreciate it because, it kind of puts things into words for me as I find that I'm sure it puts it into words for other people too. So I think there's definitely value to what you're doing.
Yeah, it's super weird because I never thought of myself as a writer, and to hear people resonate with the things that you actually write and put out publicly. It's just such a weird experience for me. And I'm still really new. I mean, there's obviously a lot of people in the veteran writing community that have really established a name for themselves. A lot of the guys in like Dead Reckoning Collective, even some of the earlier guys from OIF and OEF, like Jack Carr and others. I mean, they, from even before time like that, you know, they've established themselves as really military writers, but the poetry aspect of it is kind of unique in the last couple of years. The last probably 5-10 years at the most is where I've seen a lot of the post 9/11 GWAT writers start. I don't know if maturing is the right word, but there's a change in a lot of people's attitudes towards opening up, becoming vulnerable, talking about their experiences in ways that aren't like, so I was there and this happened, but like a lot more of like, I was there and I felt like this. And it's really, I think to a lot of people, it's empowering, which is really cool to hear. That I think maturing, I used it before. I think that's the right word. Is there's a maturing that's going on. It's really cool to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there, you know, typically there's so much focus on like, you know, so there it was type thing, like the cool guy stories of like what played out. But then like there is that, you know, big part of like what happens internally, you know, that like, what are the thoughts that are associated with the cool guy stories, you know? So I think sharing that is definitely valuable. But I'm curious, like, you know, you joined a little bit, you know, post 9/11 time frame. I mean, what branch did you join? You know, how old were you, and what was like the final straw for you to join, even though it was so much past 9/11?
Yeah. So I didn't end up joining until 2014. So like way past, you know, 9/11, 2001. I mean, a lot of the kids that I went to high school with enlisted right off the bat, to one degree of success or another. But I grew up in a family where they're like, broken family. Dad was military, mom was not. Spent a lot more time with mom than dad. And mom and stepdad said, basically, like, go to college, get a degree, get a good job, and you'll be worth something. My dad's experience really resonated with me, and it was something that I never really let go. I mean, he was a public servant, an EMT, a firefighter, a sheriff's deputy at one point. And that never really, that desire to give back and to serve in some sort of positive capacity never really left. And so I went through college trying to kind of do both. So I studied political science and completely ended up detesting everything about it. I mean, like I studied political science, and this is how broken it was. Is I studied political science and came out with a degree in the arts. I don't know how you can do that. You study a science and get an art degree. Yeah. But it was super strange. And I wasn't mature enough to handle college. I mean, my freshman year, I was 18. I didn't know what I was doing. I knew that I liked arguing and public discourse. I knew that I liked policy. And I knew that I wanted to study something that was oriented around government and service. And so political science was it. As I went through that curriculum, I started looking at international affairs, thought I wanted to go into international development, work for someone like USAID, under the State Department, and eventually ended up, of all things, going into the Peace Corps.
No kidding.
Yeah. So I went to Africa as a part of the Peace Corps, and discovered that also was not a brilliant choice for somebody who had a kind of a more professional ethos, who really wanted to work hard.
Is that to say that you didn't find yourself working as hard as you had hoped when you joined the Peace Corps, or like speak
I
more
think,
on that?
well, I can't speak for all of Peace Corps, right? Like Peace Corps is a I don't want to say a massive organization, but I think it expends like 1% of the national budget every year. So it's pretty big for what it is. Yep. There's a lot of people that go through it, and there's a lot of different countries involved, and each country is like its own branch or department. They all function a little bit differently. So when I went through, there were like 4 different departments in the country that I was a part of. And there was education, where people would go and teach. There was agriculture, where people would go and try to help people develop better and more sustainable forms of agriculture. There was health, which I was a part of. And then there was, I think for a little bit, there was microfinance, where people would go in and try to use like more business oriented skills to teach people how to improve their businesses and therefore how to improve their lives. And so my experience with that was probably not like, my takeaway from that experience is probably not the average Peace Corps volunteers, which was that the Peace Corps in itself has awesome opportunities to expand your own horizons, but it doesn't do a really good job of any measurable way of improving the lives of the people that you're around.
Interesting.
I mean, you quantitatively, like, I would say it's negligible. Qualitatively, as far as your own experience and the people that you impact, I think that there's something there. Yeah. I mean, you form bonds and relationships, but
then
I don't know how. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So like, is it a lasting effect, or did you make a friend kind of thing for a while and they were positively impacted by you being there, but then it's temporary, So
yeah. And your goal is to have some sort of a legacy, something that lasts longer than your presence there. I mean, one of the people that I was over there with got married to a foreign national in that country, and has been back a number of times. I know a lot of volunteers from that country that have gone back and revisited people that they're close to and close with. But as far as actually, so for my little sector of what I was focusing in, as far as the human existence there, I was really focused on improving people's nutritional lifestyles, just trying to educate them on a well-rounded diet. Like something as simple as, we take for granted, like the food pyramid and all that stuff. They've been doing things the way they've been doing things since the dawn of time, and it works for them. Yeah. Some of the happiest people I ever met were over there, and they had very little. And it really changed my perspective on like, okay, like, are we actually doing things right? Like, maybe they have some redeeming things that we're missing when we try to change what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. That is it's an interesting point. That I feel like you can only like have that thought with that experience and seeing it yourself,
Yeah. Yeah. It made me question, okay, like something, for example, is like, this sounds super, super jaded, but the average life expectancy where I was at was around 40 years old. Right. And in the United States, you're hovering in the low 80s. But if you think about it in a utilitarian way, like, what does someone in their 80s actually do for society?
It's a good question.
I mean, I'm not saying that they don't do anything, but reproductively, as far as procreating or furthering the human genome, the survival of the species, I would say that other than the few wise men that contribute to the overall knowledge base, you start to become, I guess, top heavy, where they become a burden. Right. And whether or not that's explicitly stated in that culture, it exists. Like,
interesting.
Supply and demand is a thing there. The less supply of old wise people there are, the more the demand there is. It really changed my opinion on a lot of stuff like that. What do our Western perspective and how it applies.
Yeah. So then I'm so curious, because I mean, I feel like to the outside world, you know, myself included, the contrast between like the Peace Corps than the military, it seems almost like an oxymoron that you would do both. I don't think I've ever met anybody that's done both. So I'm like, what was that contrast like? And how did you go from Peace Corps to saying, okay, I'm going to join the military now?
Well, so I got an email my freshman year of college when I was feeling pretty lost and confused about what I wanted to do with my life.
Mm-hmm.
And it was from a officer selection officer from the United States Marine Corps. And it was, you know, it had one of those fabulous like hook like titles or subjects. It was like, you know, do you want to serve your country with the best of the best or something like that? And I was like, yeah, sure. Why not? And so, I followed up with them and I had no idea what I was getting into. Like I was 19 years old. I thought that I had a pretty good background and understanding of military culture and history. I mean, my dad was 20 plus years in the Army. I grew up with virtually nothing but books about military history and culture. And I went to Quantico for the Officer Candidate School's Platoon Leaders course, and I finished my junior's course there. And it probably was the most transformational period of my life, for sure. The most humbling experience I've ever received, the most learning I did in probably the shortest amount of time. And I realized how very little I knew and how unprepared I was to go into the military. I mean, I was 19. I would have graduated at 22. I would have gone to the basic school for the Marine Corps right around 22, 23.
Yep.
And then whatever contract I came out with, I'm pretty sure I wanted an air contract and I wanted to fly at that point. But after going through the course, I was really dead set on changing it to a ground component and going to like the infantry officers course after TBS.
Yeah.
But when I graduated and when I actually came home, it was towards the last couple of days that I was there. And it's only a 6-week course because they split it in two. You go to juniors between your freshman and sophomore year, and then you go to seniors, or at least this is how it was. You go there between your junior and your senior year. And once you get your once you get your diploma, you commission, you start your service obligation from there. But yeah, so I went through juniors pretty much into the last days of the program there. Realized I had no idea what I was doing. Realized that I would have been in charge potentially of a decent sized group of Marines and sailors by 23, 24.
Yeah.
And had I wouldn't know how to look. I wouldn't know how to look a 20-year senior enlisted. I wouldn't know how to look them in the face and tell them to, figure out their life and do better when I have no idea what I'm doing with mine and not doing very well at it.
It's funny because that's I feel like that's an uncharacteristic amount of maturity for, a new like potential LT going in, where I feel like most LTs, they kind of go in a little bit guns blazing, kind of a little bit arrogant, ready to boss some people around. And they don't think about like the gravity of the situation before they find themselves there, So.
Well, I mean, I think I was forced to, because I went in kind of with that kind of confidence, right? I had this cocky, arrogant nature that I still have occasionally. And I, 19 years old, I want to say above average physical fitness. I was not scoring near a 300 on the PFT. And there were dudes that were. Yeah. There were guys who were sergeants and staff sergeants who had been in the Marine Corps for, over a decade, going through with me as a 19-year-old know-nothinger. And it made me realize like how vastly unprepared I was personally, and just in character development too. Is that, I mean, I failed, I want to say 2 exams. I don't know if it was 2 or 3, but it was like the maximum number you could fail before you get kicked out or dropped. And it put me in that place of like, oh man, like if I can't do this and other people can, like, how am I supposed to meet the standard when I've got, between 20 and 50 other lives going through something similar and they're depending upon me. I felt that weight and that burden. And I think that might've been my saving grace, because I decided to not commission, then go into the Peace Corps, get done with the Peace Corps, have a better perspective on what I wanted to do with my public service and what I wanted to get out of the military.
Interesting. So because you were not you didn't take a scholarship from the military, it was a PLC. So that's the kind of like, you can do the program, but not be obligated to a number of years. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's honestly the way that they should do it. I mean, it's a non-obligatory contract, I think. I mean, that's what I remember of it. So when you leave that program, you have a code that kind of follows you around for a while. And my OSO, or the officer selection officer, and I didn't really see on the same terms when I left. I think that they had some different motives than I did in going to OCS. Like they had a vested interest in their career to get recruits through, or candidates through rather. And I had a vested interest in seeing, kind of the big picture of the Marine Corps as someone who is just going into it, of like, no, you want the best that you can push through this program. You don't want just bodies. So yeah, when we separated, or when I said I wasn't going to continue, I think there was some communication that was probably not the best. And so I had a real hard time enlisting at a later date, because this little code that followed my name and social around created an administrative nightmare later on. Yeah.
So almost like not following through with that. I don't even want to call it a commitment, because it wasn't really a commitment per se, but not following through with that PLC kind of setup that negatively impacted you.
Yeah. And that was my first real challenge with the military was a civilian. Like getting to PLC was pretty easy. Like getting a haircut, working out, showing up at the airport, flying to Virginia, and then going to Quantico, like pretty easy. The most challenging part was when I chose to enlist. And at 24 years old, having to basically beg recruiters to do some administrative homework to figure out how to get me in. Because there was a lot of fresh, simple 18-year-old, no past, very easy enlistment folks that they were chasing to fill quotas. Right.
Sure.
And to actually like advocate for myself and to not only ask them to pull me a favor, but to also say, well, okay, you pulled me a favor. Here's the contract options you're giving me, but I'm not going to take a contract unless it's exactly what I want.
You're kind of like a recruiter's nightmare, barely worth
Absolutely.
the effort.
Yeah, exactly. Which is super ironic, because I felt like my contribution, my personality, my character, was something that was super valuable. And the maturity that I brought in my early 20s, I feel like I had a pretty positive effect on most of the people I interacted with.
Yeah.
And I really, if I could get on the soapbox for a while, I think I would talk a lot about that, is like how people should take some time before they get in to know exactly what they want out of the military, because it takes everything from you during that contract period. You should get as much out of it as you can.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. I mean, I think that, joining early is a great move, but if you're kind of going in there without a plan, without knowing what you want to get out of it, then you could walk away with nothing, but if you took some time and kind of strategize a little bit before and knowing like, okay, how do I optimize this opportunity? then you can get out, with everything kind of thing. So I can appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it's really hard too, because especially for folks who want to go into combat arms, like anybody who wants to go in the infantry, they need to take more time than the folks who want to go become a nuclear technician on a submarine or, a communications technician working in, aircraft sensors and avionics and stuff like that. Because those give you the technical skills that you can take right out into the civilian world and apply those. But if you're going into the combat arms, and when I signed my contract, I waited until I went to the Navy. I knew exactly what I wanted, which was a corpsman contract that sent me into the reserves so I could continue my civilian job.
So just to back up a second. So you were originally PLC to be commissioned through the Marine Corps, but you ended up enlisting in the Navy?
Yep.
Okay. And so did you enlist because you kind of backstepping on that PLC thing? Like they wouldn't allow you to be an officer, or why did you decide to enlist instead of getting that commission?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. So when I went through the Peace Corps, well, I guess before I went through the Peace Corps, while I was in college, I went and got my EMT. And I started working in emergency medicine in the field side of the house, which is a lot less academic and rigorous than going to med school and getting your MD and becoming an ER doc, or, somewhere in the middle even is going and getting your nurse's license and then working in an ER or something like that. And so I kind of went the super easy route, which was getting my EMT, going to the Peace Corps, doing some field medicine domestically and overseas, coming back here, realizing that emergency medicine is something that I was super passionate about. And when I was looking at military options, field medicine is kind of a tricky one. You either go in as a medic for the Army, a corpsman in the Navy, a medical technician in the Air Force, or I don't know what it's called in the Coast Guard. I'm pretty sure they have medical personnel in the Coast Guard as well.
Most likely.
I'm not sure if it matters. Sorry, Coasties. But there's that. There's your super basic level, and then there's the officer side where you can go and do all the medical stuff and the nursing stuff. Those require degrees and commissions. And then there was kind of the middle ground, which was the special forces, super high speed guys going, 18th Delta, I think, is the Armies. And then you got the SARC and the Navy. And I knew that academically, temperamentally, characteristically, I knew enough to know that I wasn't super interested in pursuing a career in, no matter how lucrative, in med school. Like, I just didn't want to go sit in a classroom for another 6 years and then go spend a bunch of time in an ER. Like, I like being outside. I like being, I like getting dirty. I like being in the field. And so when I looked at my choices, that narrowed it down a lot. Because I knew I could work up, right? Like I could always go in to the Army or the Navy, or even the Air Force, and then try to push towards one of those more advanced schools as an enlisted person. And to me, that, even though it was financially a lot less sound, to me, I think that I took a lot of pride in knowing that I was going and I was actually, I was not necessarily the hard work, but I was doing the hard work that occurs in the field. Where, I mean, you're that critical bridge for, I mean, the moment you take a casualty, it doesn't matter how good of a doctor you are. If there's nobody in the field to stabilize that person, to get them to you, your medical skills aren't worth a whole lot. So, so that was the route I chose. Yeah. So I waited until I got the exact contract I wanted. I think I went to MEPS like 3 times, did the research, and made sure that, yeah, I got my A school on there, and I got my, I guess, C school right in the contract. So I didn't have to worry at all going through boot camp or even A school.
Which is so, I mean, that's so unique. And that, like you said earlier, like going in, knowing what you want can kind of make or break, because if you didn't know that you wanted that specifically, you could have ended up anywhere. But knowing like, I want this in my contract, and you made sure it specifically happens, like you kind of, you set yourself up for success in that sense, which a lot of people.
Yeah. And I don't think they understand how much leverage they have by just walking into a recruiter's office. And I don't think a lot of people have the confidence to go up to a recruiter and say, like, I want this job specifically.
Yeah. Unless
it's guys who are going, special forces, where that's all they want, right? Like they just want to go be a SEAL or a Green Beret or whatever. If you're anybody else kind of falling into a less specialized MOS or job specialty, then yeah, I mean, you have a ton of leverage. I mean, walking into a recruiter's office, just know what you want and take the time to research it. Because again, like your time in the military they're going to take as much from you as you can. You owe it to yourself and your future to do the research and figure out exactly what you want and what each one of those schools entails, each one of those duty stations entails.
Yeah.
And that information is all available.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think, like you keep saying, you owe it to yourself to get the most out of it, because the military is going to get, what they want out of you, kind of thing. And I think that there is like, when you're new, there is definitely a level of ignorance in thinking that, everybody there is there for your best interest, and they, like to a degree, certain leaders care about you and stuff, but it's still a large organization. And if you're not taking care of yourself, you can still get lost in the shuffle and kind of like, dust it off at the end of it. And so I think like making sure that you're paying attention, and pursuing what you want out of it is really critical to making sure you don't get out disgruntled like a lot of people do.
Yeah. I think that's probably the hardest thing I've experienced in the military is exactly that. I mean, even though I'm fully capable of advocating for myself, you're still fighting. At least I was big Navy, whether it's big Army or, big branch, whatever.
Yeah.
You exist as an entity at the needs of that administrative requirement. And it's so crazy to me how, well, first of all, my path was a little bit different because in the reserves, you get promoted pretty quickly. I'm not sure why. I don't know what the manpower allocations are like to push people through so quickly. But yeah, I picked up E4 and then E5, my first promotion cycles.
Wow.
Of eligibility in both of those. And I mean, to be fair to myself, I feel like I was not necessarily the most administratively competent, but skill wise and leadership wise, I absolutely felt capable. But the administrative side, especially as a field person, right? Like field medicine, teaching guys all of the stuff that was necessary to do your job. I felt that was really important, and I really slacked on the administrative side of the military. And I didn't realize how important that is to my career, because that's your evaluators. My evaluators were not in the field with me for a large part of my existence in the military in that capacity.
Yeah.
They wanted to see that I could do my annual requirements, check the boxes for PME. They didn't care how good I was at taking care of people. They wanted to make sure that I was taking care of the things that made them look good. And that was super challenging. I don't think that is a sustainable long-term atmosphere for a wartime footing. Peacetime, I mean, I think that's what most people are struggling with right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that administrative mindset.
Yeah. I mean, there's always kind of like that conflict between like, field Marine Corps military and garrison military. And, it's like some people are good at one or the other, but very few are good at both. And so, it definitely makes it difficult for some, if they join for one kind of thing, expecting garrison or expecting field, and it ends up being the other for them. It can definitely, kind of leave a bad taste in somebody's mouth for sure.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons that I'm leaving, is I know there's a lot of people in there that are kind of shaking their heads and like, wow, your battalion put you up for a map and you didn't get it because of some, administrative errors on somebody else's part. Like, why are you leaving the career? You're up for, E6, like, and you could probably pick it up here fairly quickly. And the reality is that, yeah, I could pick that up. I'm into an 8-year contract. I'm almost done with that. That means I've got 12 to go before I retire. I'm an E6 in the reserves. So I'll probably have another deployment or two, maybe, if the tempo doesn't increase drastically or decrease drastically.
Yeah.
At that level, the job is 90% administrative. My ability to do what I signed the contract to do doesn't really exist anymore in that capacity.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like, the way things are right now, that I'd be really comfortable transitioning my work ethic into an administrative work ethic rather than a field work ethic. Even though,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, even though, I mean, that's a huge part of leadership, right? Is taking care of your people and knowing how to administratively take care of your people. And so I can make that connection most of the time, but I feel like at the same time that my efforts and my energies still probably would not be fully reached in that capacity.
And it's almost a shame, because it's like, you can tell in your reasoning and how you think through this process, it's like this is the best time for you to get out, because you don't think you're going to be putting your best foot forward in what the military is going to be asking you to do in the future. Whereas the people that stay in are oftentimes like, they know this and they kind of just say, screw it, I'm going to do it anyways. And so that's kind of where you get that top heavy leadership that is not really good for the masses, And so it's like, I respect your reasoning and like you being able to kind of like internally recognize that. But it's also kind of like a little bit sad, because that's not what most people do. Most people are like, well, I'm here for the 20 years, no matter what. It doesn't matter how much I suck at my job or suck at leading. And so that, it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Yeah. It's unfortunate the way that's set up, right? Because then it almost becomes a welfare system. I mean, really, if you're not capable of getting an education or getting specialized job skills on the outside world, it's easy to stay in the military, where you have a guaranteed paycheck, you have a guaranteed position with some sort of significance, and you have status. You're generally well received within the United States. I want to say it's changing, but I mean, historically, you're well recognized. It'd be different if you're talking about you were a garbage man or a janitor or something like that. Not that those aren't valuable jobs in their own right, but they don't have the same sort of allure that the military does. I mean, Mike Rowe, I think, would argue that all day long, that those jobs are redeeming in themselves.
Yeah.
But having the ability to stay in a position that pays pretty well for the amount of work you have to do, to not get fired is pretty, it really can't beat it.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people end up phoning in their careers after a certain point, which is really challenging for me. I know it's really challenging for a lot of guys that I was in with who, did get bitter and left.
Yeah.
Cause I felt bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a difficult, reality of the military. And it's kind of one of those things that it's all an ebb and flow as we go through times of peace and then times of conflict. And it's like, it's just kind of the nature of the beast. Like we said earlier, you need guys that are good at garrison and good at the field. And there's a time in our history when we need more garrison and we need more field. So it's like, what do you do? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it depends largely on what you believe the military's purpose is, and really what you believe your personal purpose in the military is. And if you can make those things line up for yourself, you'll probably be successful no matter what you do.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're not in a combat arms MOS or job specialty, if you can draw that linkage between what you do every day and the purpose of the military, you're probably going to do fine. But the moment you stop doing that, and the moment it becomes, like a 9 to 5, I'm just showing up and punching in and punching out.
Yeah.
I think that's when things get toxic.
Yeah.
And it's hard because you do, by the very nature of the military and its structure, you do have people that depend upon you. And, you have an obligation to take care of those people to the best of your ability.
Yeah.
It's a super challenging time right now.
Yeah.
In that.
Yeah. And that's something that, like, I feel like if the military is your first career, like I joined right out of high school, and I didn't have an appreciation for how unique that was in like the culture of like being able to take care of somebody else, like you can in the military. Whereas once you get out and you start working a civilian job, like even if you're a manager, you don't really have the same mentor capacity that you do on those people below you that exists in the military. And so if it's the only thing you kind of, you get jaded to it. You kind of take it for granted, and you lose so much opportunity to have such a good impact on those people around you and beneath you, kind of thing. That I think you're only going to recognize once you leave and see that doesn't exist anywhere else.
Yeah, I think you're right about that for sure. I mean, maturity plays a huge role in what people are able to perceive and what they're able to absorb and take with them. And I mean, that was a huge consistency. And what I found is that those who joined when they were 18 struggled a lot, not just to take care of themselves, but to take care of other people too. And I mean, if you think about like child development and like, infancy and being a toddler and then growing up from there, like there are certain phases where you, like as a teenager, you are super self-absorbed, like no one else kind of matters. It's a very vain sort of development. And I think that when you go into the military, there's definitely a portion of the population that reverts back to that, where they're so focused on staying afloat and treading water in the challenges of military life that they never either learn or forget to take care of other people or forget to know how to take care of other people. And I mean, I went through an extended DEP. I think my DEP was like almost a year. And I feel like if I had been 18 and had an extended DEP, I think that would have been a really helpful thing too. Because you get to kind of show up and you get to see other people and how goofy it is to learn, your general orders and stand in formation and do push-ups and all that stuff and your goofy little DEP outfits. But you get to hopefully take that experience and reflect it and learn what it's like to be your, DEP squad leader or whatever, and call people and try to, organize the chaos a little bit.
Yeah.
Before you're just thrust into it.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate this perspective because I think, like it's not something that I had totally thought of when I think of like the best time to join. I often think of it from like, post high school, you're going to typically go on 2 routes, or I guess you can go on a bunch of different routes, but it's either like the military or college. And so I think of it, from a fiscal point, college, like you're just immediately signing up for tons of debt. And so like from a fiscal point, it's probably better to do that afterwards, go to school afterwards. But maybe from a maturity and perspective standpoint, if you want to make the military a career and provide the best you during that career and be the best mentor, having more maturity when you enter, you'll likely have a better impact, and you'll know yourself better, so I appreciate that perspective that I honestly had not really considered.
Yeah, I think I'll echo that, is that no matter what you do when you're 18, you're going to waste a significant amount of time. I think that's just part of being 18 these days, is whether you go into the military or whether you go into college, you're going to accrue a massive amount of debt, or you're going to spend a lot of money that you're making while you're in the military. I know I did, even at 24, I still wondered where all the money went sometimes. My experience in college was very similar to people's experience in the military. Is I did not maximize it. I didn't know how to make the best of the relationships that I could have established in college, that I definitely maximized while I was in the military. I didn't know how to advocate for myself when I was in college, to set goals and to set boundaries and to really focus. And I saw the same thing in young people and young adults, especially in the military as well. And so, yeah, I mean, if you can financially, if you're capable of it, I think that's one of the best things you can do, is just take a little bit of time and do a little bit of research, and not just into the job that you want to do, but in yourself. Get a little bit of life experience.
Yeah.
I know that the Marine Corps is actually toying with the idea of increasing their minimum age requirement.
Wow. I
think it was like to 21. Wow. Yeah. There was an article a while back, that somebody had tossed around an idea of, especially in the infantry, of making the minimum age. I think it was 21.
Interesting.
And I think that that's not a bad idea, honestly.
I hadn't heard that. I might look into that, but I think there's something within, I don't know, I feel like mindfulness gets kind of thrown around if you listen to different, it's kind of like a yoga type thing. I feel like it's kind of has almost like negative connotations, because it feels a little bit like, I don't want to say fruity, but I don't know, for a lack of a better word. But that's something that as I get older and more mature, like I have so much more appreciation for, rather than just kind of like acting, by the seat of my fly. What is that saying? How's that saying go? Acting on the seat of your pants. Yeah. But being more like mindful in, my actions and who I am, and spending more time like internally reflecting, and like being able to bring that into the military, is always a good thing to know yourself more if you're going to be a leader,
Yeah. And ultimately in the military, I mean, to bring things full circle, everybody's a leader at some point. And you really have to know yourself to be a good leader. And I think that that's one of the things that, got me into writing and is what connected us in the first place, is that mindfulness aspect is something that, I mentioned before. There is a maturity that's taking place in people who are coming out of the military, post 9/11, post GWAT. I don't know if GWAT's officially ended, but for all intents and purposes, I think it probably has. I mean, post OIF, OEF, post 9/11, a lot of those guys that are coming out, I think are maturing and being able to be comfortable in the mindfulness realm. And I think it's a super positive thing. I mean, I know it's kind of touchy and feely and kind of woo-woo for some people.
Sure.
It borderlines on like yoga and astrology being kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
But I don't think it is. I think it's a component that's been neglected for so long, and often been forgotten about, because we focus so hard on the "so I was there" stories. I mean, the Greeks and the Romans had some really interesting traditions as far as dealing with with feelings, especially like post-combat grieving, going through fear together, things that we organically do or did up until modern transport became available. Stuff that we forgot about, getting in touch with ourselves and each other, and becoming invested in each other and actually caring. I think that it's so easy to get distracted by what's at your fingertips, phones, digital media, stuff like that.
Part of me thinks that maybe because like there was a period, where kind of like, early 2000s, social media was kind of becoming a thing. And so like, I think we're kind of circling back around to this mindfulness thing, because maybe after this much time on social media, realizing that it's garbage and it doesn't actually provide that community and like communication and, those relationships that we originally thought it was actually providing. And then now here we are 10, 15, 20 years later, realizing that it's not going to help at all. And so here we are trying to like kind of full circle and spend more time actually talking and like reflecting rather than distracting ourselves. But that's just my thought.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, and I don't think you're wrong. I think that the most useful tool that we've ever invented is probably the cell phone. Because literally whatever knowledge you want is at your fingertips.
Yeah.
But like any tool, it can be abused. And I mean, I saw some like really like kitschy, like one-liner quote recently that like, your feet, what is it? What did it say? It was something along the lines of like, you are what you see in your feed or something like that. And I had this kind of epiphany moment where like, that actually makes a lot of sense. Like if you don't focus and channel what you want to see with this tool, you're just passively absorbing information. You're not taking an active role in feeding your brain and your soul. I mean, to get a little bit touchy feely, but like, and so, I started to lock into certain things that I thought were really helpful. I mean, I'm going out like in this next year. I'll be dropped to the IR and eventually separated entirely.
Cool.
But I think that even though I'm taking less of a role in the military than I ever have in the last, 5-6 years, I've learned more, I think, in the last 6 months than I have in my entire military experience, just through a lot of these social media pages that share specialized knowledge that is applicable to what I was doing. Yeah. And it was not a tool that I accessed while I was active and actually doing things.
Yeah.
So the potential is there to make it awesome, but there's also the vice aspect of it for sure.
Yeah. Why do you think it is? I mean, is it intentional that you're finding these things and using these tools now, but you weren't before? Or like, is it just a new thing that people are actually using social media for a tool rather than trying to be influencers, like?
Well, I think it even goes beyond that. So like, I know that for me, some of the more stressful moments and experiences I've had in the military, I've used digital media as an escape, right? Whether it was, looking at like hot female influencers, or whether it was looking at, I don't know, like guns and tactical wizardry, like, it's easy to get distracted by that stuff. The challenge is understanding when it's becoming a vice, when it's becoming an escapism thing, and really understanding that it is a tool. I haven't seen a lot of people trying to actively become influencers. And maybe that's just my limited social circle.
Yeah.
But what I have seen is I've seen a lot more people, and especially older folks, nothing against the younger folks, I think it's just a maturity thing, start to convey real genuine feeling and genuine knowledge, and not just what they think is popular, but what they actually feel and experience.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the break of where it becomes a really good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that quote you said, because it kind of reminds me of the other quote, like, you are the average of the 5 people you hang around the most. It's essentially that, but in like digital form. And, I find that like I'll go through different periods where I'm like loading up my feed with like, I don't know, business or workouts or whatever. But then it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's like that becomes everything that I'm seeing, focusing on. It's like, well, that guy just made $1 million doing this, and here I am, not making $1 million. So it could be equally damaging and discouraging as it can be helpful in a sense, like depending on what you're putting that in that feed.
Yeah. And I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, if you're the sum of your 5 best friends, your 5 best friends are all on your phone, like a lot of the times.
Yeah.
And especially during COVID, right? Like probably all the time.
Yeah.
Or should be all the time. But you're absolutely right. And that insecurity is something that I've dealt with in relationships a lot too. I mean, romantic relationships is you see the best of what people are posting. No one posts their worst stuff. Yeah. They post the best stuff. And so whether it's, somebody just made $1 million overnight, on Robinhood, or they just got, engaged or had an anniversary in some, tropical resort, super romantic place.
Yeah.
Whatever aspect of your life that you're currently, in question or insecure about, you'll find it on social media and it will get the best of you if you let it. I mean, I was listening to something recently, and it was talking about how we're just not programmed as humans to have this much social reflection.
Yeah.
And to deal with so many social opinions all at once, whether passively or actively. To compare and contrast your life from the lives of people all over the world instantaneously every day.
Yeah.
I think is really, really harmful in some ways. Which is why I think it takes a lot of focus to make the best of that little device at your fingertips.
Yeah. That's interesting. It reminds me of a conversation I had with my pastor not too long ago, actually, how back in the old days, it was like, you get a message via carrier pigeon or something like that. And then you wouldn't get another message for like a month. And so you have like a month to process the information you just received. Whereas like you're scrolling or you get, notifications on your phone, like breaking news, and it happens every 5 minutes, and you have like 20 seconds to process like each ridiculous information when it looks like the world's burning, It's like, well, the world's not really burning, but when you get something new every 5 seconds, like, it looks like the world's burning. So like we don't give ourselves time to process that. So it's interesting. Yeah.
Well, I think what we're finally figuring out to a large degree, and I think we can see it kind of culturally and socially, is that there's a certain amount of rejection that I think people are experiencing with social engineering, digital engineering. I mean, people and scientists and business have come together and figured out a way how to hack the human brain. They figured out how to get you hooked to that device to hit they have become your own drug dealer. Yeah. I mean, they can hit those endorphin switches in you, and suddenly, all those likes that you've been chasing are substituting, the same endorphins that you'd get from real in-person relationships or hard physical workouts. And I think people are starting to reject that, and they're starting to figure out that like this is a game that they have taken advantage of, and it's really up to you to moderate it, just like alcohol or anything else.
Yeah. Totally agree. I love this topic. I could talk about it all day, but I also want to kind of circle around back a little bit to, to the military and how, I don't know, is like, I'm trying to connect it a little bit. I guess how can young men and women like protect themselves and their mind, I guess, and their conscience as they go through their military career and not get too caught up in that. I mean, I'm kind of pulling something out, trying to connect it back to.
Well, I think that we are connecting it insofar as, I mean, you can maximize your experience with social media, digital media all the time while you're in the military. I mean, you could pull out your phone right now and you could be sitting at dental, you could be sitting at medical, waiting for your records. And instead of scrolling through whatever it is that you scroll through that is a time waster that escapes from that moment that you're in, you can take advantage of it. You could be looking up things to better your job or yourself or your leadership or your technical skills. It is such a powerful tool. I think though that for me, I wish that I had figured out how to be anonymous earlier, because I think by attaching your name to a social media profile and your job to a social media profile, it puts a lot of pressure on you to conform to that. And the reality is the military is far too diverse to just be your job. And I don't think that we want people to be just their job, because when the job's not great, people's lives aren't great. And then you end up with a lot of jaded, disgruntled people either in or coming out.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that's something that, in my life I've been trying to recognize too, is that like we so often find our identity in our job. And like, if our whole social media, existence only enhances that, identity, it's like, well, who are you, And so I think a lot of people, they use their job and whatever they do specifically, and it's like their name associated with that job. So that's interesting.
Yeah. And taking your name out of it. I mean, like I did, becoming Save Rounds, just the handle. It allowed me to express creatively what I don't think I would have been comfortable expressing with my name attached to it. And eventually that will come out, right? Like the only reason it's not is because as an anonymous person, I get to badmouth whoever I want and not worry about the consequences. There's a certain amount of credibility that lacks, but I'm okay with that because I'm not worried about the credibility. I mean, I think that what I write and what I put out there is probably fairly well received, because it's not exclusive to my experience. And not that I try to write for other people, but I try to write about things that a lot of people experience.
I think that there's also a difference where it's like you're approaching it with maturity rather than, you're not like one of those obnoxious meme pages where you just like trash on like a person or a topic or something. It's far more thoughtful and intentional, and recognizing it as an issue or a topic to be discussed rather than just like crapping on something.
Well, and I think that the military should do a better job of that. I mean, the reality is that the military has become somewhat of the nation's babysitter. I mean, we send our 18-year-olds there and we hope that they, grow up in the military. And
I was a poor parent, so let's see if Uncle Sam can fix my poor parenting skills. Kind of. Well,
maybe not just that. And I don't want to say that like, you're a poor parent because your kid went in the military. Because I know there are a lot of people that are good parents and they have, and they encourage their kids to go in the military. But I think that there's this illusion, and maybe from, an older era where the military does take good care of its people. And I'm not saying it doesn't, but I'm not saying it does better than you can take care of yourself or your family can take care of you. And I mean, becoming aware of that, I think is really important, that your personal development is solely dependent upon you in the military. It doesn't matter your job, your MOS, what you do, what your pay grade is. You are responsible for how you personally develop. It sucks to not get promoted. It sucks to get NJP'd. It sucks to have all those things happen. But I think that, there's lots of people out there who've taken they've taken cues from, Jocko Willink and said, good, like those were the best things that ever happened to me. Getting NJP, getting passed over, those allowed me to take more time and invest in myself and figure out what I needed to get better at. As, a person or as a professional.
Yeah, totally. And one thing that I've recognized through my time is that like the same things that are going to get you promoted in the Marine Corps will get you a job out of the Marine Corps. Like going to college, reading certain books, like with the exception of maybe like going, being a fast runner or something like that. Nobody in the outside world cares if you can run a fast 3 mile, but for those pursuits of education and personal development and like, growing professionally, it's going to help you on the inside and the outside. So I think,
well, I think you're right, but I think that also, I think that being a fast runner, demonstrates a certain amount of discipline, right? And if you're able to channel that discipline into other areas of your life, you're going to be successful no matter what. I know a guy who is doing the same job I am right now as a civilian, and he's getting out of this job. And this job isn't a bad job, but he's going to become he's becoming a professional triathlete and triathlete coach.
No kidding.
And he took the same amount of discipline in learning how to do the job that I'm doing right now, and applied it to that. And I think that you could take that kid and you could put him on the moon and he'd probably be successful.
Yeah.
I don't think that there are limits on those personal characteristics in the military or the civilian world. If you're disciplined, if you're focused enough, you'll succeed.
I like it. Do you feel like you got, through your kind of like indirect path into the military and spending more time reflecting on like what it is exactly that you wanted, do you feel like you got what it was? Do you feel like you got what you were looking for in your time in?
Man, that's a good question. Well, I feel like I got what my contract said I would get.
Okay. All right.
I feel like I got the schools. I feel like I got the active time. I feel like I got a taste.
Mm-hmm.
I think that taste is also something that's really challenging. It has been challenging for me and a lot of people, which is you get a taste of what it's like to be a part of an organization that every day is bigger than you are, that every day is working towards some abstract, noble goal. You took an oath, you're defending freedom. At least no matter what happens at the end of the day, you get to go to bed with that. Right. I think that, not to draw on another circle, but I think that one of the challenges that I face and a lot of my peers face, some of my best friends in the service face is we didn't get to shoot our shot. And there's a lot of people I know that, have seen a lot of combat. And I think that there's some writing pieces that have come out recently that have talked about, the easy way. Combat is the easy way to define someone. And I think that it's, I'm not saying, and when I say that, I'm not trying to disrespect anybody who's been through combat. That's not what I mean.
Yep.
What I mean is it's an acute way to figure out who you are. I think for a lot of people like myself, without that experience, we have to
keep looking.
We have to take a lot longer.
Yeah.
To figure out where we fit. There is no come to Jesus moment.
Yeah.
There's no sense of like, this is testing your mettle.
Yeah.
It's a really weird feeling to know how awful that experience is, but to also be trained for it for so long and to want to experience it and to have that arrogance to know you'll be good at it.
Yeah.
And that's a false arrogance, obviously. There's a lot of people, including myself, that probably feel that, and, we might suck at it.
Yeah.
But with that, it's a very small club.
Yeah.
And a lot of people want to get into it. And the first step is joining the military. And if you never get into that club, it's very easy to end up wasting your time in the military too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think that was fairly controversial. I think that probably irked a fair amount of people one way or the other.
What's that exactly? What you just said?
Yeah. Well, I think there's probably a lot of people that would, not be super happy to hear that somebody has generalized their combat experiences to defining them. Cause I also know a lot of people who went through combat and they're still struggling. figure that out. But I think that the writing that I've seen recently from a lot of vets and a lot of service members, regardless of combat experience, is that they were looking for that easy way. They were looking for the trial by fire, the thing that defined them as rapidly and as acutely as possible.
Interesting.
Because there's identity, I think, that a lot of people are searching for.
Yeah.
I know I was.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we're all searching for identity in our own way, and so some people think they'll find it through combat, other people think they'll find it through money, other people will find it through a relationship, so like everybody's looking for their way to find out, like, who am I, what am I, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the people in the military, I feel like it's a common one to pursue it via combat.
Yeah, and there's such a status associated with that, right? And these days, it really doesn't help. Well, okay, I don't want to say it doesn't help, but right now, especially, there's, the idea of the bro vet, right? The I'm going to make a t-shirt company and I'm going to make a coffee company, and I'm going to get rich. Yeah. I think there's a lot of people that struggle with that too. Is that, well, that's my reward. Like, that's why I want to go do that stuff, because then I can not only can I take away that experience, huh?
Like sell a book. You can monetize that experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's challenging to see people who've not only defined themselves, but to make money off of that definition. Again, it's one of those contrasts of like, I didn't do that. I'm not identified as that, and I'm not making any money either in the military out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. It's some good stuff, man. Yeah. I can definitely relate to that, because I don't know, like it's kind of like if you haven't done it, then you feel like you haven't done anything, but you can still do a contract and like you did more than most, but then because you did less than, you feel like you did less than others, you feel like like it was kind of a waste or something. I don't know.
That was the whole point of my handle as save rounds.
Yeah.
Is you end up feeling like a saved round. You end up feeling like you've been floating around in the military's pocket, just growing rusty, getting dinged up, and no one's ever going to shoot you. Yeah. No one's ever going to give you your shot. And, it's a crappy thing to feel. But at the same time, I don't think that is, I think that it's okay to feel that, but I don't think it's something that people should dwell on or get depressed on. There's still opportunities to maximize.
So how do you feel like people, what kind of advice would you give to somebody that's dealing with those thoughts that it was all for nothing?
I think that the social media is a huge tool for that. And the people in your life right now are a huge tool. And I know that COVID is really challenging that in a lot of aspects, because you can't find that social cohesiveness. I just went home and visited folks for a couple of weeks. And I live in such a bubble right now in the middle of nowhere that I didn't really understand how inaccessible people are in social environments. Like, I was trying to get together with some friends and trying to find a bar just to go have some beers at. Yeah. Is impossible. Yeah. So I think that I've seen people find relief and find brotherhood or sisterhood through social media, and find a lot of wisdom in ways to how to deal with life as it is right now. As someone who joined the military and isn't getting the full brunt of the military experience, as somebody who's living through COVID in the military or out of the military, as somebody who's coming of age in a time when things are socially and politically chaotic. Yeah. It really pays to lean into each other. And in order to do that, you have to be vulnerable with yourself and with other people. It cannot be just, your life is not your social media presence. You cannot be just the best of everything.
Totally.
Cause you won't connect. You're not relatable.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. Awesome, man. I really enjoyed this because honestly, it's so different than the other podcasts I've done. It's like I have such an appreciation for, you know, genuine conversation, like mindfulness, and kind of like, you know, just kind of like digging up thoughts, you know. And so I've really appreciated this. But I do want to, you know, I'll try to close with the standard questions I do close with. One of them being, do you regret joining the military?
No. I think it's one of the best things that I ever did. I think the thing that I wish that I would have done to make it better is just figured out my life a couple of years sooner and figured out how I could use the military to better my life and to get the most out of it a lot sooner. And that being said, made the commitment, like actually, you know, not hesitated, but figured out how to commit and to do that.
Okay. Is this, with that said, is it something that you would recommend? I mean, I know you've kind of touched on that throughout, but
yeah, I think that people need to understand that the military is a giant apparatus, and its experiences are about as diverse as the amount of people that go into it. And you know, no matter what you see on the commercials, not everybody fires a gun. Not everybody drives a tank or a fighter jet. Not everybody's on a boat. I mean, a lot of people are in offices. A lot of people are sitting behind computers. A lot of people are running spreadsheets. You really have to do research into what it is you want to do. And I think if the military is something that you want to do, you owe it to yourself to figure out how you can make the best of it so that you can make the best out of it, not just for yourself, but other people that you're around, and better the military in a small way that you can.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I like to give people an idea of like the spectrum of the experience of the military. Because just like any job, you've got your good days and your bad days. But you know, I want to be careful to not shine the military in like a glamorous light where every day is rainbows and unicorns. So, you know, something that you're comfortable with sharing your spectrum of, like, you know, a great day you had versus a not so great day you had.
Boy, great day that I've had. It's hard to narrow it down to one specific experience. I will say that, and you know, it's kind of weird because it doesn't necessarily relate to the military, insofar as I wasn't even in uniform. I wasn't even doing my job, but I formed a relationship with a really close friend who, we broke some barriers, and we did get kind of woo woo, and we were able to have like a more feeling conversation in a place that is not sensitive to that. And to be able to stand up with somebody else and to have a conversation about feelings and to have a conversation about, who you are, what you really aspire to, what that really means, about maturity, about responsibility and accountability, not just fiscally, but emotionally.
Yeah.
I think that transcended just the military experience, but just, I mean, many experiences I've ever had. And that happened at a gym. That happened, like, you know, outside, where somebody was pushing me through exercises that I didn't think I could do. And in breaking that wall physically, I think it also helped us break through a wall of being able to talk about things that were, you know, more than just our jobs.
Yeah. And I think like that's something that also comes with like time and maturity, is recognizing that, you know, life isn't about the jobs. It's not about the money. It's about the relationships, you know, and like, and really like just connecting with people. 'Cause at the end of the day, Like we can lose our jobs and we can lose our, money. But it's the relationships that's going to keep you grounded.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's absolutely true. And something that I neglected for a long time because I was so focused on the job. Worst experience I've ever had. I think that I can summarize a lot of the worst experiences I've ever had by, and I think a lot of people can probably relate to just general poor leadership and underperforming commands. I mean, I think that there's so many people that want to do their job. Like they feel the connection to that. They are motivated to do that job. They're motivated to succeed. They have a competitive nature. They're type A personality. I don't know what it is, but I think there's a lot of people that want to do their job.
Yeah.
And I was one of those people. I still am. I want to take care of Marines. I want to take care of sailors. And when I feel like commands get in the way of doing that, that's every time that happens, it's a huge challenge for me.
Yeah.
And there's times where, they've been right. I just didn't see the connection. I didn't make the connection. Yeah. And there's been a lot of times where they've been wrong. And, for me, if you took combat readiness and turned that phrase into administrative standards, I think you'd see a lot of changes real quick because like when you get to the semantics about, what is combat readiness?
Yeah.
How am I contributing to this? If you can't contribute, you feel frustrated and suffocated, and stagnant, and no one likes that feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. Awesome, man. I appreciate it. Is there any closing wisdom or anything that you'd like to provide, share?
Oh man. I mean, I had something a few minutes ago.
So it's like,
I
don't know if you can add any more, but if you have a thought, feel free to share it.
Well, I think that, for those people who are listening to your podcast, a lot of them are probably financially minded. They're looking at it as far as a transaction goes. And I think that there's supply and demand in everything. And, substance, like real substance, is one of the most rare qualities you're going to find these days. You can find relationships that are substantial. They're more valuable than gold.
Yeah.
They're the most important things that I've found to invest in. And one of those relationships that you can't ignore is the relationship you have with yourself, and figuring out what makes you tick, what drives you. That can be as simple as taking a Myers-Briggs, or it can be as complicated as seeing a therapist. And I think these days, seeing a counselor, a therapist, is not something that people are seeing as weak anymore.
Yeah.
Which I'm stoked about.
Yeah.
Because you're the only person you'll live with for your whole life. Might as well get to know you.
Well said. Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate the time. I appreciate you sharing your story and sharing those thoughts, because they're well articulated, and I always appreciate some genuine conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for having me on, and I hope we can keep chatting here in the future. And I'm always listening. I'm stoked that this is happening.
Thanks, man.
So
thank you. Awesome, man. Well, we'll stay in touch. Hey guys, like I said, I hope you enjoyed that episode. Saved Rounds was a great conversation. Like I said, it was different than any other episode that I've done, and I really enjoyed how genuine it was. It was a great conversation. So I hope you guys got as much out of it as I did. If you enjoyed it and want to learn more about Saved Rounds, you can find him on Instagram via saved.rounds. Does some great writing. Thanks again, guys. See you guys next week.